This is a 97.5 The Fanatic production. Birds Buzz with Andrew DiCecco. News, analysis, insight, and conversation from your trusted Birds insider starts right now.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Birds Buzz. I am Andrew DiCecco, Birds insider for 97.5 The Fanatic, and Eagles insider for InsideTheBirds.com. And it was not a pretty sight. It was not aesthetically pleasing in any sense on Black Friday when the Eagles were donning their all-black uniforms, losing to the Chicago Bears 24-15. And we're going to break down some of that. We're also going to look ahead to the game in L.A. at SoFi Stadium versus the Los Angeles Chargers. I will be at the game, one of my favorite stadiums in the NFL that I've been to. And it's suddenly becoming a very big game for a lot of different reasons. Okay, so Thursday night, depending on when you're listening to this is when it comes out, the Cowboys and the Lions are facing off at Ford Field. I believe it's at Ford Field. But, you know, optimal conditions, two teams that are kind of heading in different directions. The Cowboys are red hot right now. They're playing with a ton of confidence. And then I think you look at the Detroit Lions, and they seem to be reeling a little bit, almost like they don't have a lot left. They lost Terrion Arnold, their corner. He's on injured reserve. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I don't believe is playing in this game. He's a huge part of what they do offensively. And they just seem like a team that's burnt out. The way that they practice, everything, they just don't look like a team that has a ton of juice at this time. And Dallas looks like they do. Now, if Dallas wins this game, you can make an argument that it's likely they run the table just based off of their upcoming schedule, which heightens the importance of Monday night when the Eagles go to Los Angeles. They have to beat the Chargers, especially if Dallas wins tonight. Needless to say, you would like to see an Eagles win if you're a fan, and I assume if you're listening you are, because it might quell some concerns that you have about a spiral, about a 2023-like collapse. I don't view it that way. I don't think this team has any similarities to that team solely because of what they have from a defensive standpoint. Vic Fangio, the assistant coaches, which I've lauded for a year and some change now. They don't get nearly enough credit. They get credit when I speak about them, but because of the coaching staff, because of the defense and the personnel, you're not going to see a slide on that side. Offensively, do I think they're as lackluster on that side of the ball as they were against the Bears? No. But do I think they're as high-powered as they looked against the Giants? No, I think it's something sort of in the middle, like maybe portions of what you saw against the Rams or the Buccaneers or even the Minnesota Vikings game. I think that might be more an apt comparison. But they have to get right against the Chargers. And the Chargers, and we'll get into that matchup in a little bit, have a pretty sound football team. Not a lot of household names aside from the quarterback, the head coach, and some other players. Derwin James, who's a tremendous back-end player on that defense, but they can beat you in a number of different ways, and it's indoors. I mentioned SoFi Stadium. It's a level playing field, if you will. But let's get to the Eagles and the Bears very quickly, because that was a game that was disheartening to watch if you like watching offensive football, if you like seeing teams be able to kind of get into a shootout. That was sort of a throwback style of game, and the Eagles were gashed in the running game, 281 combined rushing yards from DeAndre Swift and rookie Kyle Monangai, who's a seventh-round pick out of Rutgers. They had the thunder and lightning approach. They really were able to get the Eagles on misdirection and outside zone runs, forcing the defensive linemen to play horizontally and knock them off balance and then take advantage of the running lanes that were there. And the Eagles didn't have an answer for it. I thought that the Chicago Bears did a nice job of playing extremely physical. Darnell Wright pretty much caved in the left side of that Eagles defensive line. I just thought that from start to finish, the Chicago Bears offensive line, which they do have a pretty formidable group there, I thought that they really took the Eagles to task. You don't often see the Philadelphia Eagles, especially in the Vic Fangio era, fall victim to stuff like that. I mean, there were moments in the Cowboys game where I think you can look at the offensive line from the Cowboys' perspective, be able to drive the Eagles off the ball, but you rarely see that, which is why I think if there is a silver lining to come out of that Black Friday game, it's that you're probably not going to see the Eagles replicate a performance in which they give up that many rushing yards, where they're not able to stop the bleeding. I believe that they're going to get that rectified. The players after the game were extremely accountable. I can think of, and I want to give a mention to just some off the top of my head, and Jalen Phillips spoke, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Zach Bond, Reed Blankenship. I'm sure there's others that I can't remember from the defensive side. Cam Jurgens spoke. I know we're talking about defensive guys, but as these names sort of come to me, but I want to give them credit because they stood up there and they answered every tough question. It's not easy to stand up there and try to find answers after you were sort of taken to task by the opposition, and it's a humbling experience in many ways, and I thought that all of those players that I mentioned and others that I'm probably not remembering at the moment deserve some props for doing that, because it's certainly not easy. But you look at what the Chicago Bears were able to do from an executional standpoint. There was some razzle-dazzle there, and I know that it makes the Eagles' lackluster or uninspired offense all the more frustrating when you see Ben Johnson and what he's able to do on that side. But I also look at yes, there were some wrinkles, but it was really simplistic. They had a ground-heavy attack. Between Monangai and Swift, they carried 40 times for 255 yards and 2 touchdowns. And you knew that it was going to those two guys, and you weren't able to stop it. Now, from an offensive perspective, I didn't think either quarterback had a good game. I thought Caleb Williams and Jalen Hurts, the win certainly impacted it. And when you look at the game, it requires context. Now, the Eagles were able to get something going later in that game, but it just was too little, too late. We're not going to get into the whole 2-point conversion fiasco. In the grand scheme of things, that's item number 18 in terms of urgency, urgent talking points coming out of the game. But I thought that for that particular game, Jalen Carter struggled mightily. He played 61 snaps. That was, I believe, 72%. Eagles played 87 defensive snaps in that game. But it's very rare that you see Jalen Carter sort of get washed down in the running game. And it was evident that he was not himself. And after the game, he mentioned that he's dealing with something and was sort of mysterious in the way that he framed it, but said he's not about to tell anybody what he's dealing with. And he didn't make an excuse for it. No one made an excuse for it, for any of their defensive shortcomings. And that's been a common theme throughout the season. There's no excuse making. There's no finger pointing. But when Vic Fangio, Eagles defensive coordinator, spoke on Wednesday, he did intimate that, he's dealing with a shoulder injury and talked about how he made a nice play later in the game. But that's an injury that Jalen Carter has had throughout the season and even dating back to training camp. So obviously it's something that he's going to have to play with and learn how to navigate this season. And you have to wonder if they're going to have to implement more of a heavier rotation. And that includes rookie Ty Robinson, who's been inactive for most of the season. And Vic Fangio said, we'll see. We'll see how it goes in terms of how the injury could affect Jalen Carter's snap share. I think Jalen Carter has accounted for 72% of the Eagles' defensive snaps this season. He's a dominant force in the middle of that line. So to see him sort of get cast aside pretty easily by the Chicago Bears. And again, they have a good offensive line, but you just don't see that happen to Jalen Carter. He's usually an interior penetrator. He causes havoc. He's effective against both the run and the pass. And so it raised some level of concern for me. I should say, it made me wonder if there was something else at play. But it is something to keep an eye on throughout the week here, as the Eagles begin to practice on Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, and they go to L.A. And so, there are certain things in that game. You don't see Nakobe Dean, who played 82 snaps in that game. He's been a physical presence in the middle of that defense. He didn't have a good game. Neither did Zach Bond. Jordan Davis, who played 59 snaps. Moro Jomo played 62 snaps. Didn't play well. I thought Jordan Davis got a little high in terms of just coming out of, off the ball. And then Jalen Phillips, I mean, he also didn't have a good game. But you look at the time of possession, I think the Bears had it for 19 more minutes or something to that effect. No, Kobe Dean was asked about that and how that affects the defense. Jalen Phillips was asked that about how that affects a defensive player, and neither one. They said, that's on us. We got to tackle the running backs. We got to make plays, get off the field. Obviously, when they're running the football, the clock's winding and all that, but they said the onus is on us to make plays and get off the field. So we'll see what they're going to be able to do, but giving up 281 rushing yards, I assume that you're going to see an Eagles defense come out Monday night with a chip on their shoulder, looking to prove a point and see what they're able to get going against the Chargers in a game that feels like there's considerable magnitude in terms of where they are in the season. But we should also look at the fact that Jihaad Campbell didn't play any defensive snaps in that game. He played 6 on special teams, but if you look at the way that things were trending coming off the Lions game, it was 20 snaps against the Lions. It was 11 against the Cowboys, and then it was 0 against the Bears. That's a trend that has been something that I've been monitoring. And Vic Fangio mentioned that, I think that there was room for him to get some snaps in there. I mean, they played 87 defensive snaps. You have to find a way to get your first-round linebacker who's played well this season. You got to get him in the mix. I think to short-change him of opportunities is depriving him of continuing on with that development. And he was making tangible strides every week when he was a starter. Now, Vic Fangio has also mentioned that it's very difficult to take Mukuba off the field when he's playing well. But nobody on defense was playing well that week. And I think Jihaad Campbell gives you athleticism, sideline-to-sideline range, cover ability, and a game against the Chargers that can spread you out. I do believe that you might see more Jihaad Campbell, maybe to the effect of what you saw him play against the Lions, about 20 snaps or so, I think would be, something that would be feasible. But Vic Fangio even said, I should have gotten him more. That's on me. And I agree with that. But for Jihaad Campbell, as talented as he is, to only play 6 reps on special teams, none on defense, in a game in which they could have used anybody to help, I thought that was really curious. And I don't think that that's going to be something that continues. Maybe situational based. You may see him out there. I just get the sense that they're going to find a way to work him into the mix. Now, Vic Fangio, as I've mentioned on this podcast before, he doesn't traditionally like to rotate at that linebacker position, at least in his career. He hasn't implemented that tactic. But you have to make an exception when you have someone as talented as Jihaad Campbell. But let's look at the facts. The Kobe Dean's a better run defender. He's a better blitzer. And I think what he brings to the table versus what Campbell brings to the table, they complement each other perfectly. Because then you have the length and the ranginess of Campbell. And I think when you have a player like that who's making noticeable signs of growth every week, you owe it to him to keep him in there and continuing that upward trajectory. So that's something to keep an eye on. I thought that was a little curious. When the snap share came out, I was curious to see what it was, because I remember watching that game and thinking, I don't believe Jihaad Campbell was in there at all on defense. The Eagles also have a situation now where they've opened the practice window for safety Marcus Epps. Marcus Epps got hurt after the Giants game going into the bye week, and his practice window was open on Tuesday, so the Eagles could conceivably add him to the active roster on, ahead of Monday night, so he can go out there and play some safety. But I think this is interesting because Sidney Brown did not have a particularly strong showing in the matchup against the Bears. There were opportunities in coverage. There were missed tackles. And to excel in a Vic Fangio defense, you have to be fundamentally sound. You have to play within the confines of that defense, and you have to be somebody that he can trust. And I've mentioned this several times, there's considerable amount of responsibility that's placed on safeties and linebackers in this defense. And if Vic Fangio, for one moment, has any reluctance to overload you with responsibility, yeah, I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to maintain a starting role, I would say. But we'll have to wait and see. But when Vic Fangio was asked on Wednesday about whether or not he believes that Marcus Epps will be ready for Monday night and whether, if so, he would be in contention to start, he said yes to both and then talked about how he has a good feel for the game and, you know, he's played some football, he's got some experience. And so I think you look at Marcus Epps and, I mean, barring a setback, I believe that he will be the starting safety against the Chargers on Monday night. And what he does bring is stability. He's fundamentally sound. He's highly intelligent. He's been a tremendous resource for Reed Blankenship in the early part of his career. He's lauded Marcus Epps for what he's done for him, and pairing them together, I think, could be probably the best case scenario for the Eagles without Drew Mukuba, who's on the shelf with the fractured ankle. But let's look at this, because Marcus Epps in 2022 started all 17 regular season games, all postseason contests, and in the Super Bowl, when they played the Chiefs in Glendale, Arizona. And he also then went to the Raiders in free agency, and I think injuries hampered him there. Signed with the Patriots, got hurt there, I believe. And now he's back in Philadelphia, and I think that was a savvy move to bolster that group for a player that, yeah, he's not going to wow you with overwhelming athleticism or be able to cover a ton of ground, but he is a highly intelligent player who can handle a lot, and he doesn't get fooled. He's not going to get taken advantage of or fooled. So I don't think there's as much guesswork. There's a little bit more stability there if they're able to get him into the mix for Monday night. So good news there. So let's look at the Chargers very quickly, because the Chargers are a football team, and Justin Herbert, their star quarterback, had an injury to his left hand. That's his non-throwing hand. He had surgery. It seems like he's going to play in this game. I'd be shocked if he didn't, knowing that he's a competitor and knowing what's at stake here. But they're also missing their two tackles, and Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, two tremendous tackles. They're not going to be there. So you're relying on reserve players. Their offensive line has been in flux all season. Mekhi Becton, their right guard, former Eagle, he has not played well. And I haven't heard the cries from Mekhi Becton as much. And Tyler Steen's been fine, by the way. But their offensive line is sort of in shambles, and it's impacting their ability to generate any sort of consistency offensively. But they could be getting their rookie running back, Amarian Hampton, back. It seems like it's trending in that direction. He went to UNC, and he's been an effective player when available. So you look at a team that was sort of on the ropes in the Eagles against the Bears and the running game and all that. To add Amarian Hampton to that, you look at the receiving situation. They have Quentin Johnston. They have Ladd McConkey, who's a route running technician, has a really good feel for spacing and can find the soft spots in zone. He should see a lot of volume in this game. And then you have Keenan Allen, who might be one of the best route runners in the NFL, still playing at a high level. And, I mean, you look at that group. Oronde Gadsden, the second, their rookie tight end out of Syracuse. I covered him extensively out of the draft. They have a number of playmakers there that I do believe that they will get involved. And then defensively, there might not be a lot of household names, but I just think that when you look at Derwin James, Dante Jackson's a player that you should highlight in this game because he's always around the football. He makes good breaks to the ball, reads it well, and he's a little undersized, but he has really good short area quickness. And you look at their linebacker situation. Deion Henley is an under. I think he went to Indiana. I want to say I liked him a lot coming out of the draft. I want to say 2 years ago. 6 foot 225, rangy, fast, athletic. He's made some big plays for their defense this year. Tyir Tart in the middle of that defensive line. Khalil Mack is there. They have a lot of players and they're playing, and they are a top 5 defense. So in those situations where you're playing indoors and it's a beautiful stadium, I just think that this is going to be a tough spot for the Eagles offense to generate production. I think the most logical course of victory would be to throw the football in this one, but that's not what the Eagles do. So we'll see what they have schemed up for this particular matchup. Defensively, though, I like this matchup for the Eagles' edge rushers, whether that's Jalen Phillips, Jalix Hunt, Nolan Smith, going against two backup tackles. Even from an interior perspective, I think Moro Jomo gets a sack in this game. I'm not going to say that Jalen Carter will until we see, what that shoulder looks like this week and how that impacts how many snaps he plays. But Moro Jomo has been a really good rusher from the interior. I think he gets a sack in this one. I'll say Jalix Hunt gets one as well. Because if they're able to get to Justin Herbert, who should be impacted by that injury to his, even though it's his non-throwing hand, I do believe that you're going to see a big rebound from this defense. You're not going to see a continuing spiral from what we saw on Black Friday. And I think they're going to get it right. They're going to take this one personal, and they're going to make sure that they handle everything on their end. Now, offensively, I mean, the Eagles have to get something rolling. They have to get something rolling, and I feel like we talk about this every week, and we probably have. But there's always so many buttons that they can push, and I think when you look at what they have, you could shake things up in personnel. There's always so many ways you can go there. Implement a little bit more Tank Bigsby to supplement Saquon Barkley. Maybe 7-8 carries. Maybe you get Will Shipley involved as a receiver. Maybe you look at Cam Latu, if you want to go heavy 12 personnel, and you deploy him as your second tight end, as that inline blocker to help create some more space. There's not a lot of ways that they can go. We mentioned Marcus Epps on defense. I mean, I think you're going to see something different in terms of how they utilize some of their personnel, but this is a huge game against the Chargers. And my early feel on this game, I feel pretty good because I think the defense is going to be able to get to Justin Herbert, and that's going to alter the complexion of this game. But from an offensive perspective, they have to get it right. I mean, we're entering Week 14, and there hasn't been a lot of reason for optimism. So I understand everyone who's listening, and you have your frustrations about the offense. I go back to everything that I've said all season, that it is a collective. There's many components. It's not about assigning criticism or what have you. It's about, for the Eagles, trying to find answers, and they don't seem to have any. There's nothing they can really hang their hat on, but that's going to have to change in L.A. It could be a low-scoring game based off of, the defense and on both sides, and the offensive shortcomings also on both sides. So I'm really excited to cover this game. I'm excited to see how everything starts to unveil, but we'll have plenty more coverage on this, on the station and everything else. And make sure you're liking and subscribing, and please leave a 5-star review, leave a comment, and I'm grateful for it. I appreciate that. But for now, that's going to do it for this edition of Birds Buzz. I am Andrew DiCecco, and I'll catch you on the next one. Hey guys, Andrew DiCecco here. Hope you enjoy Birds Buzz, and be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. And if you liked Birds Buzz, check out our other videos on YouTube on the links right here.